In 1970, over 450,000 Michiganders clocked into auto plants, believing their jobs would last a lifetime, with union contracts promising $5 an hour, security and pensions after 30 years. But behind this confidence, pressures few wanted to notice had begun to build. How did life in Michigan really function at its industrial peak, and what clues did most people miss about what lay ahead? Frank's day began late in the afternoon when most of his neighbors were settling into dinner routines. By 2 o'clock, he was already on Interstate 94, his Chevy's radio tuned to the local Motown station. The highway crowded with a steady stream of Fords, Buicks, and Oldsmobiles, all headed in the same direction. The second shift at the plant ran from 3 to 11, and every minute counted. At the factory gate, a line of men waited to punch in, each carrying a lunch pail, each watching the clock. The punch card machine clacked with every arrival, a ritual that marked the start of another 8 hours on the line. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of oil and metal. Frank greeted the familiar faces at his station, then settled into the rhythm of the assembly line. The work demanded focus, installing the same part over and over, as thousands of cars moved past each shift. Breaks were short, and the lunchroom filled quickly at 6. Everyone talking union news, Tigers scores, and whose kid had a game under the lights that night. Outside, the whistle signaled every change. Start, break, end. When the 11 o'clock bell finally sounded, Frank joined the crowd heading back to the lot, tired but steady, knowing tomorrow's routine would be nearly identical. For Frank, and thousands like him, the factory's rhythm set the pace of life, predictable, demanding, and for now, secure. Union contracts in 1970 spelled out the promise that drew workers to Michigan factories. The new UAW agreement set wages at $5 to $6 an hour, enough to make a house payment, keep a car in the driveway, and stash away savings for the future. The cost of living allowance, called COLA, meant that every time inflation ticked up, paychecks followed. Workers could count on steady raises, not just once a year, but every quarter when prices rose. The pension formula was simple. 30 years on the line, and you could retire as early as age 58 with a monthly check for life. Health insurance covered hospital stays, doctor visits, and even dental bills. These benefits were something few outside the auto plants could match at the time. Overtime pay, holiday bonuses, and seniority rights added layers of protection. In union halls across the state, stewards read the terms with pride. At a meeting in 1970, one steward summed up the mood. He said, "This contract means security for life. You do your 30, you've earned your rest." For families, these numbers were more than lines in a contract. They were the backbone of a stable life, fueling the sense that a career at the plant could provide not just a job, but a future. Thursday evenings in 1970 meant Little League baseball for families in Michigan's growing suburbs. Kids in crisp uniforms gathered under the lights, while parents filled the bleachers, coffee in hand, swapping stories about the week's paychecks and who had landed overtime. The rhythms of the auto plants shaped everything. School calendars lined up with factory shutdowns, so families took vacations when the assembly lines paused for maintenance in July. Main Street stores timed their sales to payday, with window displays shifting just before checks were issued. Barbershops, diners, and hardware stores thrived on this steady pulse, their regulars arriving like clockwork after shifts or on weekends. In neighborhoods built on auto wages, lawns were trimmed, and driveways filled with new Chevys or Fords. Children rode bikes along quiet streets. Teachers greeted students by name in the halls, and yearbook photos caught the same faces year after year. Parents volunteered for PTA meetings and coached youth teams, confident that the next season's roster would look much like the last. The promise of a steady job meant mortgages were paid, birthday parties planned, and college funds started early. For many, life felt predictable and safe. The sense of belonging ran deep, reinforced by Friday night football games and Saturday trips to the corner bakery. Families trusted that hard work at the plant would keep the lights on and the future bright. In these suburbs, stability wasn't just an idea. It was visible in every routine, every handshake on Main Street, and every cheer from the ball field. Mabel's living room window looked out over a street lined with brick duplexes, each one built on the promise of steady work. She had moved to Detroit in the late 1950s, part of a wave of black families drawn north by auto jobs that promised more than the cotton fields of Alabama ever could. By 1970, she and her husband both worked for the Big Three. He worked on the line at Chrysler, and she worked in the trim department at Ford. Their paychecks covered the mortgage, groceries, and Sunday dresses for their daughters. Still, the city's boundaries pressed in. Even with union wages, finding a house outside certain neighborhoods was nearly impossible. Realtors steered black families away from the suburbs, and banks rarely approved loans for homes beyond the city limits. The schools her children attended were crowded, and playgrounds needed repairs. But the sense of community ran deep. On Sundays, church pews filled with neighbors who shared the same struggles and the same pride. Union cards, a car in the driveway, and hope for something better for the next generation. 100 miles north in Saginaw, the town's fortunes rose and fell with the GM supplier plant. Nearly every family counted at least one member on the payroll. When rumors of automation or layoffs spread, the whole town responded. Petitions circulated, union halls filled with anxious voices, and local leaders pressed GM for answers. In 1970, a supplier rally drew hundreds, determined to keep work in Saginaw. Their efforts held off cuts that year, keeping paychecks flowing and businesses open on Main Street. For towns like this, the factory was not just a job. It was the lifeline. The rhythms of the plant shaped every part of life, from school calendars to church picnics. In both Detroit and the smaller towns, pride in work was real. But so were the limits, set by history, by policy, and by the unspoken rules of who belonged where. A headline from the Detroit Free Press in the fall of 1970 read, "Import tide hits Detroit. Foreign car sales up 20%. On dealership lots across Michigan, managers passed around memos warning of the same thing. More Volkswagens, Toyotas, and Datsuns were rolling off transport trucks than ever before. For the first time, some showrooms were forced to cut prices on unsold American models, while imports disappeared as fast as they arrived. A composite worker, recalling those days, put it simply. You'd see a Beetle parked next to a Mustang and wonder how it got there. Then next week, there'd be two. The numbers backed up the chatter. Import sales in Michigan jumped by a fifth in just 12 months, rattling confidence from the factory floor to the executive suite. No one wanted to say it out loud, but the sense of invincibility was starting to fade. The competition was not just in the papers, it was in the parking lots, on the streets, and soon, in the paychecks. In the spring of 1970, a memo circulated through the UAW Local 900 office in Wayne. It was typed in block letters and read, Ford to install first robotic arm online. The news landed with suspicion on the shop floor. Talk turned to rumors about machines that could weld faster, never tire, and never ask for a raise. Within weeks, the first robot, a hulking Unimate, began its trial run at Ford's Wayne assembly. Operators watched as it swung its arm, spot welding panels where men once stood. Grievances followed, filed by workers who feared for their jobs or worried about safety after a near miss with a misprogrammed clamp. The union stewards pressed management for answers, their voices echoing in crowded break rooms. The stewards demanded clear plans for safety and job security, and the mood on the line grew tense. At the same time, Detroit's city council debated a new round of budget cuts. A municipal report projected a 15% reduction in city services, with fewer garbage pickups, shorter library hours, and slower police response. The scars of the 1967 riots lingered in empty storefronts and neglected parks. For many, the combination of automation in the plants and shrinking city support felt like a warning. The stability that once seemed unshakable now showed cracks, visible in both the factory and the neighborhoods beyond. Michigan's factories once fueled a national sense of certainty. Yet today, no industry feels untouchable. As automation and global shifts redefine work, the promise of stability grows rare. The question now is, how do we rebuild belonging and purpose when the foundation keeps moving? Share your thoughts below.